Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, we get to a question that could decide the fate of the game on Saturday. Who's excited to be here? And we get to a team that is unbeaten. Haven't hurt us in any way, shape, or form yet.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. So place your first $5 bet and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. And we've got a varied grab bag to dive into on today's episode. We will get to the round ball before we are out of here and hear from Texas Tech head coach Grant McCasland as the Red Raiders are on the scene in Kansas City for Big 12 basketball media days this week. And given some of the additions to the team over the offseason, kind of wondering if maybe there'll be an evolution of sorts as to where this team will be rooted, oriented, or geared, front court, back court. We'll get to some of that and some thoughts from Coach McCasland coming up in just a moment. We'll hear from Texas Tech special teams coordinator, running backs coach, associate head coach Kenny Perry, specifically on what he saw happening with his special teams unit on Saturday against Baylor. Certainly they played their part in several of the turning points of the game for worse for Texas Tech. We'll get to Coach Perry coming up in just a moment. But first, wanted to head out Cowtown way and take a listen to Texas Christian head coach Sonny Dykes speaking on some things that pertain to his team, but maybe also something that a Red Raider here or there might need to hear this week as well. Here's Sonny Dykes.
You know, that's what we talked about a bunch. Just how important it is when you look around college football. You know, you got to get yourself ready to play every week. You know, how do you explain some of the things that have happened in college football? And what it boils down to really is the team that's the most excited team to play, that's the most energized, that gets themselves mentally ready to play and focused and excited, honestly. I mean, just football is an emotional game, and you got to have that kind of emotion, and we got to do a good job of making sure that our players have it. And obviously we had a really bad performance before, and, we did a really bad job. I did a really bad job of getting the guys excited to play. And so, I thought our players really responded to that. I thought it propelled us to get off to a fast start. I thought it created some doubt in Utah's mind, particularly early in the game. Now, we didn't, finish as well as we should have. We had opportunities offensively that we wasted. The first two series of the game, we had opportunities to score points, and we didn't do it. And that 3, 6, 10, 14, whatever it was going to be points that we left out there, certainly could have made the game different. But yeah, I thought our guys were fired up. I thought we set the tone defensively for the entire night. And I think our players now hopefully understand, how important that element is.
Chris, there are a lot of things we talk about like transfer portal, NIL, and things that may make margins thinner from roster to roster. And of course, in the Big 12, we're in the land of the thin margin. But with that being true in and of itself, there's still an additional layer that's always been there, and maybe even more important now. Who's excited to be here? Who's ready to go when you kick things off? And seemed like the team in red and black last time around, at least, was not the more excited football team. So we're hoping that changes this week.
It's just the one thing week to week that odds makers, fan bases, even coaches can't quite put a finger on sometimes with the pulse of a team. Because of a motivated team can make up for a lot versus of even a very talented, unmotivated team or excited team, however you want to phrase it. I think what Sonny's talking about is that they had their Baylor game a couple of weeks ago on a Friday night at home versus Houston, and it was just like, what? Huh? Like what is happening? Well, and you kind of point and laugh and go, ha ha, and then the same thing happens to you, and you look up and it's 24-21, and you're like, okay, we're going to get over the hump and all that. And then it's 52-21. And then you're like, and now people are pointing and laughing at you. And I think that the same could be said for both situations, for both teams, in that kind of flat, not maybe excited, playing against a team on paper that's not as good as you, that is below you in the standings and all that stuff. And that's the tricky part about the portal these days, is that you bring in a lot of people into your program, and they don't know, there's no history there. They don't know why they're supposed to be pumped. I mean, that's kind of, you know, some of that is lost. But I tell you, I mean, Sonny, he's saying what Mike Leach used to say all the time. I mean, there was a game, I can't remember who the game was against that it kind of started against, but I know you went to go play in Ames the next week on the road in kind of cold, snowy weather. And Mike joked a lot about, you know, our guys are going to they're going to have fun with each other. I'm going to force it. We're going to play Foursquare all week. That's what we're going to do up here at the football building. We're not going to let them talk to you guys, but you want to come up here and look, they're going to play Foursquare, which is like some old game that they played in the 50s and 60s at recess, I think. You know, one of those deals. And so I think that it's interesting Sonny is saying that, because the team that's most excited to play usually wins. And I guarantee you that is part of Joey and his coaching staff's message to his kids this week. We need some grind. We need some motivation. We need some fun. We need some excitable, twitchy play, because they look like it in Tucson. And even when it all wasn't going well, the play showed it, and it just did not Saturday versus the Bears. But I think TCU has, you know, so maybe it'll be a game versus who can be the most excited. Sonny's trying to get that lesson pounded into his kids after already having it, you know, jump up and bite them. And we're certainly dealing with that here in Lubbock, you would think.
Yeah, it's always something that, I mean, it's always there, but it seems kind of even more so reserved for like bowl season, like who wants to be in this bowl game. And we really see that make a big difference. You almost throw out, in a lot of cases, like the talent of the roster or what you think the roster is, because if that roster ain't excited to be here, shout out to Aaron Rodgers in San Diego, California, once upon a time, then you could get waxed. And we've seen that happen time and time again. I just, you know, I think, and I've heard a lot from our viewers and listeners, from Matador Mob insiders this week, and I share this disappointment. How disappointing it is to see a team come out that way under Joey McGuire, because he is walking TNT. I mean, the dude's fuse is never wet. It's always lit. And I think a lot of us are just kind of scratching our heads like, how could a team come out sort of dampened when you've got this head coach? Obviously, it can happen to anybody, but, you know, the times when you've been beaten or when you've had a really disappointing loss, you know, like I go back to, you know, say Wyoming a year ago, you know, the Texas loss, they were a lot better than you, so I don't really attribute it to like wet wood or anything like that. But I don't feel like it's just because you didn't get off the bus until Saturday. You kind of had that feeling, and I guess, you know, nobody's immune to everything all the time. So I don't know, maybe they were due for one of those games. But I think a lot of the fans are just trying to figure out, how is a coach that is, I mean, just a fireball of energy at all times, you know, leading the team out in that fashion on Saturday. And I don't expect that you have that answer necessarily, but I know you understand that frustration, because there are other coaches who are like, man, is the coach even excited to be here? And I get why the team doesn't look all that excited, because the coach is a downer on some occasions, but that ain't the case with Joey McGuire. So I know there are a lot of fans scratching their head for that reason, if no other, this week.
It's just the one variable, because if Joey would have seen any signs of this in the middle of the week, you like call a timeout and get it stopped and address it. But this is what, you know, and I remember teams come out flat all the time, unfortunately, and you're good for a couple of those a year, it seems like, and you don't know when it's going to be. I wish I understood it too. And you know, you'll hear people say, you only get 12 opportunities a fall. How could you use one of those to come out? And I don't know either, but it guess what? It happens.
Yeah.
It's just a weird set of dynamics sometimes, and you can't figure it out. And this is why there's those big fancy hotels in Vegas, because people think, yeah, I got this thing figured out. Yes, sir, I'd like 250 thou on the blue and silver team. And then, I mean, and it's just go figure. And it's just the variable. And I think you see it more in college athletics, more because in high school, a more talented team or player, even if you show up flat or play poorly, sometimes you're just better than the other guy. And in the professional, you don't see the flat deal because they're professionals. They just keep playing, and there's so much talent on the field. But in college, it's pretty, and especially more so now, the talent is even. Not everybody's allowed to hoard it because of NIL and all those things. And so if you come out without that intangible and the other guy does have it, and it's similar, you're right. Keep your head on a swivel. Yeah. So
let's take a listen to a guy that has got to be among the most disappointed and most frustrated in the LBK this week, and that's the man in charge of Texas Tech special teams. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Say you're watching a game, you get hit with a hunch, an instinctual calling. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're going to place your bets to keep up with everything going down in real time as you submit that slip. And right now, FanDuel is going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with only a $5 bet out the gate at FanDuel.com. Let's take a listen to a guy that has got to be among the most disappointed and most frustrated in the LBK this week, and that's the man in charge of Texas Tech special teams, Kenny Perry, who spoke about that frustration.
We've played pretty good around here the last 2 years, special teams wise. And I thought, Saturday was a definite step back for us because we've been playing really good. But I thought that game turned because of the way we play on special teams. We didn't kick real well, or punt real well. We let some turnovers happen that have not happened. And it changed the whole momentum of the game. And, I'm sick. But I think you guys know I ain't sitting there crying about it. I'm moving on. But it was hard to take because that was probably the worst, we've done. So we're going to move on. We're going to be all right. But that game's totally on me. I mean, you guys know me. I'm not going to sit there and blame anybody but myself because I didn't get our guys ready to play, and they did. So, I mean, we've been playing really well. I thought that one thing this team has been doing is playing physical. And I thought that that didn't happen Saturday. They took it to us, and that was disappointing because I keep preaching for us to be one of those teams. You got to play physical, and our unit, the special teams unit, did not. And like I said, I take that personal because that's my job to get those guys ready to play, and I didn't. For whatever reason, whatever anybody else wants to say, I'm just going to blame it on myself. I'm not going to put it on anybody else.
Chris, you win as a team, you lose as a team, so it's not like you isolate a player or one phase of the game if you're a part of that team. But if you're a podcast host, I might say, boy, if it wasn't for the special teams, I might say it, but I don't know that I will say it. But, man, you think about the miscues there, and you touched on it to kick off the week. Average starting field position for the Baylor Bears was damn near midfield. It was their own 45-yard line. And, you talk about some of what happened in the punt game. Obviously, we know what happened with Dre McCray in the return game. I think we had a kickoff out of bounds also where we got a flag on and bumped them up a little bit further as far as their starting field position. And it's just like one of those things that you want to feel like is a given in that you won't kneecap yourself from a special team standpoint. Maybe you're not outstanding. Maybe you're not scoring or doing all these wild things, but at least you don't kneecap yourself. At least that's what good teams want to think. And for the most part, Tech hadn't, but, man, that was a Saturday to forget, obviously, for that special teams crew.
This has been a plus for you, and certainly this season, and I think in recent years, you've been I mean, it's been a plus. I think, we know what your specialists have done. Dre McCray was an all Big 12 kick returner coming into the season based on what he did last year. We'd seen some flashes of that this year already. And I think, you'd been really good on special teams, and like, some of the 2-point conversions, like the trickeration and some things like that, that had altered games. I just think you were winning this matchup, maybe not handily, but in these games, special teams was a net positive for you in almost every one of them up until Saturday. Speaking of things that you just didn't see coming, and maybe that's kind of what caused, or compounded the flatness. Okay. If that's, if you want to go there,
yeah,
I don't know. But and I appreciate Kenny for trying to take all the blame. I mean, I had a lot of respect for Kenny Perry, and I was there when he said these things, because he kind of opened up with an opening statement, which is what you just played. And, he just looking in the mirror and pointing it all at himself. And, look, there's plenty of blame to go around from this past Saturday. But I think he's probably right in that some of the tone was set with some of the miscues. And then you just simply weren't either good enough or mentally tough enough to overcome a lot of that. And you put yourself in a position where it was 17-14, it was 24-21, and you're kind of right there, and then it just it got away from you in a hurry. But you wish you had an explanation. Jack Burgess was not very good with your punter. It's just bad. Dre McCray's decision after the fumble to bring one out 6 yards deep when he looked kind of unsure of it, and he gets tackled at the 14-yard line. Just not a lot of. And you'd had a few. Josh Kelly had fumbled a few punt returns earlier this season. One of them was maybe friendly fire, and there's some. It's not like it had been perfect, but this had been a net positive, and it just was not. But I do appreciate and respect Kenny for kind of addressing it the way he did. And Joey blamed himself the other day. We got to be better and all those things. But I would have said, this is the surest thing I know coming into the game about your team, even though they're going to have maybe the fewest chances on the field, that ultimately decided that this was the surest thing that you had, is that at the minimum your special teams would be solid. It would be solid. It's not going to hurt you. May help you, but it's not going to hurt you. And we were wrong. I mean, I was wrong, and it hurt you quite a bit in a variety of different ways. And yeah, go figure, man.
Yeah, I definitely saw it coming. I was totally right. Line drive punt to generate a punt return, damn near for a TD. 2 muffed returns for us. Their punter bobbling the snap and then getting like a 60-yard punt out of it as it rolls to like the 80. Yeah, I totally called all that. We saw that coming. I mean, Texas Tech is just not a football team that has a wide enough margin for error for these types of things. And you got close still to like kind of almost overcoming it. I think even on the was it the return? It wasn't the return. Well, maybe it was. Either way, I think one time you held them to only 3 instead of a touchdown. You're like, all right, well, you're kind of fighting. It wasn't as much of a crisis as it could have been, but you're just not good enough to overcome all of those things adding up at the end of the day. And the most visible part of the special teams that we all expect to kind of –
it was the interception return. That's what you're talking about. I think it was the interception, and then they held them to a field goal right there.
Okay. The most visible part of the special teams that we all get puckered up over, the field goal kicking, was not a part of this conversation actually on Saturday. It was all the other things. And that's the deal that all throughout the season we're like, all right, how long is this going to keep working? But that wasn't even part of it. So I don't know what to make of it other than you just got to regather yourself and be better this next time around. I don't know what was up with Dre McCray, and I guess Burgess maybe just hit one in a way that he didn't want to, but he did his coverage team no favors with that one that was a big return. But I guess I could say these things seem like correctable things. So I don't know. Do we have, a 5-alarm fire, or just something that maybe you'll be a lot better at the following week?
And some of that excited motivation stuff spills into this.
Yeah,
you know, like, because you hear him say physical, we've been physical. And I think what, you know, Kenny, when he met with the media, like as he went on, one of the things he was like, Baylor came in and did to us what we've been doing to people. They you know, they punched us in the mouth, kind of like you went up to Tucson and punched Arizona in the mouth. And like, you know, and it spills over into those aspects of the game, special teams with coverage and sneaking one on a 2-point conversion and just doing some of those things. And like you were kind of constantly backpedaling and bobbing and weaving. You mentioned Dre McCray. I'll be interested to see if he even plays this week. Head injury. He's on the injury report. We know the percentages based on what Coach McGuire has said.
Yeah.
But maybe there's and maybe, you know, because Kenny said he's pressing, you know, and he's trying to get it back. And maybe there's a hard and fast, because Kenny mentioned it. He's like, you know, we're just better off taking it at the 25 and taking our free yardage. I agree, but what they you know get frustrated with themselves with is like, but we're taking away opportunities to get it at the 50, the 37, some of these long returns, and you have had some of those, which is why he was all Big 12, you know, preseason kick returner.
And I'll take some blame, because I think before the first one that he muffed, and I believe Baylor winds up recovering. They can't advance it, but they wind up recovering. I'm sitting there saying, give him something to catch, because they're all flying over the head. I'm like, give him one to touch. And then he touches it, and I say, okay, never mind. Wish you wouldn't have given him that one to touch, because it went the wrong way. But you can understand, just like Coach McGuire described for his offense and his defense, and I think what we saw from McCray, trying to get everything back in one play and maybe trying to press a little bit too much whenever you get down and you feel that urgency with your back against the wall, but you still got to allow things to sort of come to you. He says very humbly from his podcast chair. Certainly easy to say behind this microphone. All right, let's switch gears here, Chris. I want to get to a team that is unbeaten, hadn't hurt us yet in any way, shape, or form. First, today's episode brought to you by PrizePicks. Testing your skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports and the best way to spice up any game, anytime. You think you got what it takes to win up to 100 times your money? All you got to do is select 2 to 6 players, pick more or less on their projected stats, place your entry, and boom, you're ready to roll. PrizePicks is not only the best way to get action on sports in most states, including Texas, but PrizePicks also puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When the picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. With easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and a giant selection of players, projections, and stat categories, it's no surprise that PrizePicks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So get in on the fun and the winning and download the PrizePicks app today and use our code LOCKEDONCollege, and you're going to get $50 instantly when you play only $5. Again, that's our code LOCKEDONCollege on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you just play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. With PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's switch gears here, Chris. I want to get to a team that is unbeaten, hadn't hurt us yet in any way, shape, or form. It's Texas Tech men's basketball, the topic of the conversation to wrap ours up today. Big 12 basketball media day happening in Kansas City this week. We got a chance to hear from Red Raider head coach Grant McCasland, and a lot of things to consider. But one thing I wanted to discuss with you to wrap up this episode, and we'll get to some sound from Coach McCasland on this, was sort of the evolution of this roster from last year to this year. Obviously, you have some big additions, some of those figuratively, one of those very literally. I guess I should say two, but I'm talking particularly about JT Toppin. And I'm curious about maybe the dynamic of what Texas Tech will be as a team, and not even so much defensively, but really offensively, because I think last year I was kind of blown away that they were able to shoot the three-point ball so well. Coach McCasland said, hey, I think we've got a good shooting team prior to the season kicking off. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, I'll believe that whenever I see it. And then I'll be damned. We wound up seeing that to the tune of them being one of the best in the Big 12 from beyond the arc. He was asked about the reliance on that and how that would translate from last year to this year, and whether or not maybe we see some things free up on the inside because of what you're able to do on the perimeter. Here's Coach McCasland.
When you evaluate players, and we've tried to figure out a formula that we know wins. I think space on the floor in college basketball is so important. And how do you create space? And one of the best ways to do it is with guys that can shoot. And Chance McMillan, Kerwin Walton, and Darian Williams, who actually are representing us today at Media Days, are the three best returning percentage shooters at the Power 5 level. And for us specifically to have a group of guys that have this much experience and can really shoot the basketball, I think it allows the game to be easier for everybody as long as you share it. And it causes the most problems for defenses. And then the biggest thing for us is how do we put guys around them? And now we have Elijah Hawkins, who I think creates opportunities for those guys. And then by better ball movement, and we love the guys that we brought in. I think the size at the rim and verticality give those guys a chance to be on the floor longer. And we can play multiple different lineups, because the one thing about having 3-point shooting is good, but when people take it away, how do you put pressure on the rim? And I think these guys made big steps in the offseason of being able to bounce the ball and make decisions, make reads, and Darian Williams being such a versatile player, he can do all of it. And his 3-point shooting, I think, it really changed our team last year, and a lot of people didn't see that as a strength of his. But, shooting in college basketball, I think, provides the most space and gives everybody an opportunity to attack the rim and create opportunities for themselves.
Chris, I'm tempted to just really focus in on the front court and Toppin and even Federico squared, or two-time, as he said he's called. But I'm still kind of wondering if that might be a mistake. Do you think things are still running through the perimeter to create opportunities elsewhere, or do we see some sort of more front court focus kind of evolution this year?
Man, I just think this is the game these days. I think the game has changed, and I think that at some level everybody runs through the perimeter. And if you can't shoot it, from it's an analytical deal. I mean, I can't hardly watch the NBA these days because it's so many threes, and it's just no defense and all that. But college there's a lot of defense. There's more of a grind aspect to it, the way it's officiated, and a toughness. And I think it's the purest level of basketball that we get. And I think that, what Grant, because, keep in mind, you shot 35, almost 36% as a team last year. And that includes two guys that played a ton for you in Joe Toussaint and Pop Isaacs that were both 29% three-point shooters. That just speaks to how well Chance McMillan, Kerwin Walton, and Darian Williams did. And Chance McMillan was at 38%, and he's the worst of that trio. The other ones were at 45 and 47, which is insane.
Crazy, yeah.
It is insane. And what you brought in, even JT Toppin, he shot 34% last year. Not a high volume guy, but he can shoot it. Kevin Overton at 34%. Elijah Hawkins, I think at 34%. He was like at 46% 2 years ago at Howard, where he came from. I think Christian Anderson was like in the 40s, 45% or whatever as a high school player a year ago. He's just a scorer. So I think I do think you want to be better around the basket, which it was basically just Warren Washington and to a certain level Darian Williams, because what do you do with the 3-point miss? That's where you really ultimately want to be better. And then, then you've got your transition and all those things but in a half-court setting, you want to be able to space it out. And I think you've got everybody you brought in is more than capable. And but I think you've got to – because, I tell you who the one guy is that's not – well, you mentioned Federico, but the one guy that's probably going to play a ton, because I don't know how much Federico is going to play initially. I think he's more of a situational player or a guy that is a matchup player, depending on what you're going against and all those things. And I don't know. We'll get a feel for it. But I'd be willing to bet you if Devin Cambridge is healthy, he's going to play a ton. Yeah. He's positionless. He makes them better defensively. You can switch him off on anybody on the floor. He can handle it. That's not his strength. Last year in 8 games, he shot 9% from 3-point. That's just not his skill set. Now, the year before at Arizona State, he's in the lower 30s. I don't know if that's what you want him doing, though, with all these other options out there. But
Shouldn't have to.
I agree. And he should help you a lot more around the rim and in transition and all those things. So I think it's not that you're going to get away from being as perimeter oriented. It's just that you want to be better around the basket with Darian Williams and with Devin Cambridge and Toppin and all these guys. Because what Grant looks at is, what do you shoot? Okay, but how good of a rebounder are you? Specifically, offensive rebounder. That's really where you dig in a little further. That's where you really win games. How good are you on the glass? How many extra second chance opportunities are we giving ourselves with guys when they do miss them? Because we're giving you these percentages. Well, that means, 53% or 70% or 65% of the time it's a miss. And what do you do with those misses? And that's where they wanted, I think, be better. And I think they certainly achieved it.
Yeah. And Devin Cambridge, man, he is, I only got to see Toppin play a few times a year ago. So I know what important basketball minds think of him, but I have a better feel for obviously Devin Cambridge. And man, he was one of those that was, I think, most missed as the season went along because of what you allude to there and what he can do on the glass, kind of maybe what he could do cleaning up some stuff around the rim. And then in transition, I mean, he was a lot of fun to watch in a pretty small sample size whenever it came to that. There's a reason why they call him Bounce Man. But I'm really excited to see him back on the floor, probably as much as anybody. I mean, just because I missed him so much once he was out of the lineup last year. But yeah, the 3-point shooting was something that took me by surprise. And it also took me by surprise how you rounded out that depth as the season went along in that category, because I think it was like Chance McMillan goes unconscious at Butler one night. I'm like, all right, well, we heard this dude could shoot, and turns out he can shoot. But then we see, I mean, Kerwin Walton coming on as a sort of well-rounded player was just almost a total shock after he had been mostly a non-factor the year prior, but obviously also very dangerous from beyond the arc. I mean, Darian Williams has a perfect shooting day when he goes for 30 against Kansas. And I'm like, I didn't know we had all these dudes with all this touch. So apparently you can't sag off of anybody. You better keep a hand in everybody's face. Oh, and then we'll introduce you to JT Toppin and Devin Cambridge down low. But, man, it's really exciting because it seems like you have a chance, if you can have any luck whatsoever, knock on wood from a health standpoint, to really have one of the more complete teams that you've had in some time. You were close to that, I think, when Warren Washington was healthy last year, although the depth wasn't great in the front court. But obviously then he's sidelined and the script has totally changed. But can't wait to get to that. We're just around, 2 weeks or so from tip-off on November 5th. So looking forward to it, and should be a great season in year number 2 under Grant McCaslin. Set the bar pretty high in year number 1. So hope he's got a follow-up act for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's but I appreciate you pointing out that we saw more, of a complete game out of like Chance McMillan and Kerwin Walton. They weren't one-trick ponies, man. And that's because that's what teams do, like overplay. We're not going to let you beat us. We'll make you put it on the floor and see if you can do that. And in some cases, those guys did and did it repeatedly. So
yeah, well, because McMillan will go ahead and just tomahawk your head into a canoe above the rim also. So
and there was one of those games in December where I think Kerwin had like, I want to say like 22, 25 points. And he was dropping off assists. He was putting it on the floor, finishing at the rim. And I was like, who is this dude? Right. But that's the kind of, Grant's he's put together a really good roster, but it just fits in the middle of the pack, upper tier, but of a lot of really good rosters. I mean, a lot. So you're going to need all this depth. You're going to need guys to be good and, be better than they were and be healthy and all those things. But you've got the right guy in charge, and Grant McCaslin, that's for sure.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. All right, appreciate the perspectives and insights as always, Chris. Enjoyed it. And we got another one to go before we are done this week and back at it, sending you back to your old stomping grounds, Fort Worth, Texas, for the Red Raiders and the Horned Frogs. Appreciate it as always, man, and we'll see you for the next one.
Keep hope alive, everybody. Appreciate it.
Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Check out the Matador Mob if you want a direct line to Chris and myself. That's your ticket with one-on-one text messages straight to your phone. You can hit the show notes, find a link there for a free 14-day trial, and a special hat tip to the everydayers out there joining us on the regular. One of the best ways to help us grow the show is to comment anything below, so go on and do that. Get funky with that algorithm. We appreciate all forms of manipulation. All right, and we appreciate you for being out there. Thanks for the time, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.